beautiful people. Welcome to my channel where I talk about how to heal chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue by healing old emotional wounds that are far in the past, happened a long time ago in our early lives that we're not even aware that they are there, and we have dissociated and disconnected from so severely that it has wreaked havoc and dysfunction in our energetic bodies, which eventually caused dysfunction in the physical body. Our biological functions, our physical functions, chemical functions. Our bodies are very complex, as we all know, and it runs on energy. And all the processes that happen in our body depend on that energetic system giving them energy to function. So when we have distortions in our energetic field, for decades, eventually what happens is the energy isn't going into the chakra like it's needed into the organs, the systems, the cells, the entire systems start breaking down. They start losing function. They start getting out of balance. And eventually the toll that it takes on your body reveals itself as a collection of symptoms that is labeled as a condition, as a chronic illness. And that's what we're dealing with chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue. So what we're doing here on this channel is healing the energetic wounds by healing the emotional wounds, because from my experience, healing the emotional wounds is the only permanent energetic healing that I know of. Today I'm talking about vulnerability. One of the most unpleasant emotions that human beings can feel. Haha, yay, yay. I've referred to shame that way as well. In my opinion, most people struggle with feeling shame and vulnerability in their bodies. Not so coincidentally, they are very important, both of them, as parts of healing these illnesses, fatigue illnesses, and really probably all chronic illnesses in general. So shame, I've talked a lot on this channel about shame. I have a whole playlist about shame. And that is in your sacral chakra. The wounding of shame is in your sacral chakra. Now, for me personally, healing my sacral chakra brought me out of this illness. That is really what was the healing that needed to happen for me to bring me out of adrenal fatigue first and chronic fatigue second. And now I'm into the root chakra wounds more directly to heal other chronic symptoms, chronic pains that I have, chronic issues that are not fatigue, but any kind of chronic pain or ailment is a hindrance to our lives, right? And our quality of life. Now that I know that healing emotional wounds can heal chronic ailments, I'm not going to stop until I am out of chronic pain and ailment. And hopefully you are with me on that, because we don't need to. The truth of the matter is, what I've learned, is that we don't have to live with these. If we're willing to do the work, we can heal these things, these chronic ailments. So when we heal the energetics at a core level through emotions, deep emotional healing, I'm talking about deep body, mind, spirit healing, all in one. And for that, you have to incorporate the body, the mind, and the spirit. That is the only way that I have found actually heals these things permanently and releases the physical symptom that it's associated with. And this takes time. I have been on this journey of healing emotional wounds for over 2 years now. So as I said, now I'm working a lot on the root chakra. And that started with my healing of the chronic fatigue. So a lot of my adrenal fatigue healing was done through healing of the sacral chakra wounds. And maybe it's possible that I was healing root chakra wounds like sort of indirectly. My last video was about the fact that it's our base. Our root chakra is our base, it's our foundation, and it's the foundation for all the other chakras. So if you have distortions in your root chakra, it's gonna cause distortions in your other chakras throughout the rest of your body, your energetic body, and your physical body. Why I'm talking about the root chakra is because this is where vulnerability is. Vulnerability is a root chakra emotion. I just said I've been on this journey for 2+ years, and I'm just getting to vulnerability now. I have peaked into vulnerability, and I made a video or two about vulnerability in the past because I was having my first incidences with vulnerability releases. But, you know, for the last few months, I've been struggling with this idea of the root chakra is all about fear. Fear is an emotion, but I kept getting stuck on the fact that, but fear is a response. Fear is a response emotion, or it's a response experience. It's a response. So what is the emotion that it's responding to? I kept coming back to pain. Okay, what kind of pain? What kind of pain? And I just kept coming back again and again. Well, it's your safety, your mortality, because when we have childhood wounds, in our childhood, everything is life or death. The information that we're taking in is, how am I going to survive in this world? So whatever information we're getting, whether that's in the external environment, the physical environment, or if it's our attachments with our primary caregivers, because those profoundly impact how safe we feel in the world. If we don't feel a safe interpersonal dynamic, unconditional love from our parents in the way that we needed it, what ends up happening is we get the message that it's not, we just don't know if it's safe in the world. And so I focused on safety. What is the actual emotion? I couldn't get it. It's vulnerability. It's vulnerability. But I'm going to make a very important distinction about the type of vulnerability. There's only one word for something that I think has two meanings. What most people talk about when they talk about vulnerability is emotional vulnerability. Allowing yourself to open up in a way that you're at risk for being hurt because you're exposing yourself, your emotional self, in a way that you don't know. If somebody responds badly, you could get really hurt emotionally. That I would call like social vulnerability or emotional vulnerability. But I'm going to make a distinction between that and what I'm going to call primal vulnerability. When I'm talking about vulnerability and I'm talking about the root chakra, I'm really talking about this primal vulnerability. And to me, that means the feeling of, I am not safe in this world. I am not safe. I am innately vulnerable. We all have knowledge, this background, usually unconscious knowledge, that we are somehow vulnerable because we're human beings. And all creatures are vulnerable. We're vulnerable to being physically hurt or dying at any moment, right? So there is this primal awareness that we are. But people react really differently to feeling this primal vulnerability. That primal vulnerability is, I'm not safe. I'm fundamentally unsafe in the world because my life could be taken at any moment. I could be physically injured. God knows. I mean, we would just have to trust in this idea that I'm safe. However, when we have childhood trauma and wounds, whether that's physical, emotional, attachment, whatever kind of trauma we're talking about, something that was overwhelming to our system when we were children, because we had child emotional capacities, we didn't have adult resources like we do now, we got flooded. And it changed and impacted our brains in profound ways because our brains were being developed in those years. So when we have childhood trauma of any kind, in my mind, it sort of makes the vulnerability that's innate in being a being that's alive into an open wound. It's this place in all of us that's sensitive. It's a sort of tender spot in our body. We always know we're vulnerable, and when it gets pushed in a very real way, and by that I mean your physical body is being threatened, you go into fight or flight or freeze. And that is a healthy vulnerability base that we all come in the world with. However, when we have early life wounds where we just weren't sure if the world was safe or not, because we were getting mixed messages, or we were getting messages maybe that it's not safe and that I have to be a certain way in order to be safe, that I could so easily be rejected and rejection equals death, that for us, that sensitive spot in our body, it's not just a sensitive spot, that is like an open wound that is so easily triggered, so easily touched. And so what happens is we go through our lives and we are triggered everywhere because we have this open wound. And so it's so easy to trigger, to hurt, to poke at with just daily occurrences in our lives. At our core, we don't know that we're safe. Our root chakra is safety. It is our ability to feel safe in the world. That is key. But the emotion that's with that is vulnerability. We are vulnerable to feeling unsafe in the world because we've got this open wound. So we interact with people, we get some small social cue that somebody doesn't like us, or somebody didn't like what we just said, or they're disapproving of us, or we have a relationship dynamic and all of a sudden you feel like the relationship is insecure, that they might reject you, you're having financial stresses, you can't make ends meet. There are so many things in our lives. We have interactions at work, we have interactions with our credit card bills and our bank accounts, we have interactions with our children, we have interactions with our parents, we have interactions all day long. We are interacting with the external world. And when we have this open wound, it is so easy to trigger. It's so easy to trigger, to injure that wound again, to poke it. But you don't realize that you're being hurt. You don't say, ouch. You react. You react with fight or flight or freeze. Some part of your body reacts with freeze, or you enter the fight or flight response. You might react in anger, you might react in sadness, you might have any kind of negative emotion come up that is disproportionate to what the situation warrants objectively, but of course nothing's objective. Subjectively, it warrants a lot, because now that means I am unsafe. I could die. And these are not conscious thoughts. These are unconscious beliefs that do not manifest until we become conscious of them as conscious thoughts. It's just a feeling in our body. And it's what it is fear. And we're afraid for our lives because rejection in the human brain is the same as death. The brain reacts the same way to social rejection as it does to being physically threatened with our lives. And so this is why attachment trauma can be so impactful, because our attachment trauma defines our relational interactions for the rest of our lives, how we interact with other people and the world. And so when we develop these patterns from a place of trauma or a place of wounding, insecurity, lack of safety, vulnerability, then we go out in the world and we get these signals that signal possible rejection, and that is like a poke right into that vulnerability wound, that spot. All of this that I'm talking about is the root chakra, and the root chakra is foundational. As I said in the beginning, it's so important, especially when we're trying to heal chronic illnesses that are rooted in emotional wounds. So how does knowing this help us? Knowing this helps us because of the way that we heal wounds. The way that we heal wounds is to become conscious of them first. Actually, the first step is to calm your nervous system. But that's a whole other process, and I have a course that's coming out soon about that. That'll be linked down below as soon as it's ready. That has to be first. You have to have a calm nervous system before you can start healing wounds. But once you've calmed your nervous system and you're ready to heal emotional wounds, what we need to do is first this process of making the unconscious conscious. This is a long process, but it's condensed when you're healing a chronic illness because there's a lot that's ready to heal. It's gotten to a boiling point in your body, and your soul is trying to bring up these things to heal. So you're ready. You need to calm the nervous system, and then it's time to start making your symptoms, translating your symptoms using the chakras. And this is one of the main things that I talk about on this channel, is the process of translating our symptoms, using them as a map to our wounds, to identify them. So that is the process in the case of a chronic illness that we're trying to heal. By doing this process, what we're doing is, in order to make the unconscious conscious, we're using the symptoms, which is your unconscious, because your body is your unconscious, translating them into conscious thoughts, figuring out what is this wound in my body, and listening, really listening. And listening is like the crucial step. Learning how to listen to your body, to hear the messages that your symptoms are sending you. What is the wound? What is hurting? Because we're so disconnected from that. We're so disconnected that it's become a physical symptom. It's not in our conscious mind. So making the unconscious conscious. Now, when the unconscious becomes conscious, when we become conscious of a wound that we have, like there's never enough for me. Sometimes just putting words onto the feeling will bring up the emotion. And you can have a big release, a beautiful release. And I'm going to be doing a video on how to do emotional releases safely, because there is a window of tolerance that you want to hit in order to have a productive and healing emotional release. Sometimes that will happen. Sometimes just a sudden realization in your mind will bring up that emotion. But if you're as dissociated as I am, it doesn't happen that quickly. So a lot of work is spent carrying the thought, this thought. So I made something conscious, and now it's my job to hold space. Whether the emotion releases immediately or not, this is the next step, is holding that emotional space. The first step in that is acknowledging it. Acknowledging what that is. What is that emotion? What is that pain, that belief that has been stuck in me? What is that pain in my body? Making that conscious is acknowledging its existence. And then with that is accepting and not rejecting it, not judging it, not pushing it away. Judging is so easy to do. And that's our pattern, right? That's how it got rejected in the first place, because we judge the heck out of it. We think it's weak. We think it's disgusting. We have all kinds of judgments about how we should and shouldn't be. So that acceptance, we are trying to create loving space for that emotion to be there. And one of the things Kyle Cease says that I love is that whatever emotion you are feeling, to start getting into the practice of saying, you are allowed to feel this in my body. You're allowed to feel angry in my body. You're allowed to feel sad in my body. You're allowed to feel shame in my body. Cultivating that acceptance of allowance, that it's okay. It's okay to be in my body. It's beautiful. It's okay to be in my body. You're allowed to be in my body. And key, you can stay as long as you need to, because I am going to be here for you and love you for as long as you need it. And our bodies will test us. Our inner child does not believe it just because we say it. We have to prove it to our inner child. So we're talking to our inner child. We're saying, your emotions are accepted here, and I love you. It doesn't matter what your emotion is. It does matter, but it doesn't change the way I feel about you. It doesn't change how much I love you. I accept you. I will always accept you no matter what your feelings are, and I love you. You're talking to your inner child like your own child or somebody else's child. But like I said, your inner child is not going to believe you just because you say it. Because he or she has a whole history of me judging her, rejecting her, that part of her, rejecting that part of it. You're not allowed to be like this. I can't feel that way. I can't feel this. I can't feel this. I can't feel this. Go away, go away, push away, push away. That is rejecting. I've been rejecting my inner child unconsciously. I didn't know that I was doing it. And these parts of me that I wasn't even conscious were there, but I wouldn't allow them up. And so we might have to hold that energy, create that energy of loving acceptance. You're allowed. I love you. I love you. I love you. You can feel this as long as you need to feel it. And this is really hard to do because if you have an entire lifetime of patterning of the opposite of that, it's really hard to love parts of yourself that you in the rest of your life have seen as disgusting or unacceptable, shameful, whatever it is. And also, if you have a chronic illness, your symptoms are probably worse during this time. That is what I have found, is that symptoms get worse when an emotion's coming up and it's not coming up cleanly because it's been stuck and trapped in your body for decades, probably. And so emotions turn into this mangled, tangled, like it's not going to come out cleanly. And so you're trying to learn this process of loving and accepting every part of you. And you have to do it one at a time, in my experience. All these discarded, shadowed parts of ourselves, reintegrating them takes love and acceptance and gratitude for the inner child that was scared, the inner child, the little child who made these conclusions, who changed their behavior to get the most love that they could, and so created a pattern. Like gratitude for what that gave you. Did it give you an easier childhood? Did it give you more love when you needed it? What did it do? That gratitude is so important. So again, we might have to hold the space. I mean, literally, there have been wounds that I'm still holding space for. I have to prove to my inner, like after months of the first realization, still needing to hold this space before having the emotional release. Because the thing is, you can't force yourself to have an emotional release. Believe me, I've tried. Believe me, I have tried. It doesn't work. And if you do actually force something, then you really risk re-traumatizing yourself, making the wound worse. You don't want to force ever, and it doesn't heal anything anyway. So the idea is to leave the space for your inner child. Your inner child will bring it up when she feels it's safe to do so. When you have created enough emotional safety for her to do that releasing. And she will. You just have to trust that she will. And she will. She will. And you can also see it as your soul. Your soul knows when you are ready to see something. Not see it. You might see it, but ready to feel it. Because the feeling part is the part that we've been pushing down, pushing away, rejecting, because it feels so bad in our bodies. From a child's perspective, that pain, the original pain, felt so horrible in our bodies. The body sensations that we had when we were children, when we experienced these original pains, were so enormous that we rejected that. We said, I will never feel that again. I will do whatever it takes to never feel that again. That was too painful. It was too much. Can't do it. So our bodies and our minds separate a little bit to prevent that feeling from happening again. Again, all of this is unconscious. So I'm going on a long thing about how to release these wounds because I'm talking about vulnerability, and that's where we're going. You need to identify the emotion that is underneath these wounds. So we're talking about root chakra wounds, lack of safety. That's vulnerability. And so what you're going to find when the emotional release actually happens is that you're going to be releasing vulnerability, this primal vulnerability. And I will tell you, from the releases that I have had with vulnerability, for me, it was this gut-wrenching cry. So for grief, for example, I get a sharp pain. If I have a big enough release, I'll get a sharp pain in my heart chakra. For a vulnerability release, in my experience, I've gotten this gut-wrenching. It felt like I was going to vomit, and it felt like it was coming from my core, from my gut. And my gut was shaking more than if I'm crying from grief. My hands also got really clammy. My whole body really got clammy, especially my hands and face and stomach and back. I just got super sweaty. So when you are able to release to the point of having these tears and you are vibrating at the frequency of vulnerability, that's what's happening. But you're also, what you're doing is you're allowing the child to cry. You are allowing yourself as the child to cry, but you are also the adult in the back of your mind. Even though you are having this release, it's so important to not identify, not get attached to that emotion and to the little girl who's crying. You are loving her, accepting her or him. You are also being the loving observer, that loving presence, that loving parent as well. So you're being both. It's really important, and I'll do a separate video on this. It's really important to not get completely consumed with the emotion so that your emotional receptors get flooded. You do not want that. You want to be vibrating at the frequency of the emotion, and you want to have the body shaking and tears coming out. It's not coming out, needing to blow your nose, and all of your face is scrunched, and it's what some people call ugly crying. It's actually the most beautiful because it actually does something. It actually heals something in our bodies. But you have to keep that distance as well. You have to be both the observer and the feeler. You can't just be the feeler, because you can get wrapped up. And you can't just be the observer, because then you won't cry. You won't have that release. So in my experience, to be both is key. And that's what brings actual healing. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I hope that was helpful with this idea of vulnerability in the root chakra. If you would like to work with me, if you're interested in working with me to heal your chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue, I'm very pleased to be offering one-on-one sessions now. I 100% believe that we can all heal this stuff on our own without professional help. But I also know that these wounds are really difficult. It's really difficult to be able to see ourselves accurately. And when everything is in our heads that we're trying to figure out, it gets stuck. We can't really move forward. So having somebody to talk about, and somebody who knows this stuff, has experienced this stuff, no matter where you are on the journey, it is just exceptionally helpful to have somebody to talk to through these things, the things that you're experiencing in this moment, ask questions, and hear from a person who has done it, has been doing it. Because I don't talk about anything that I have not experienced. That's not what I do. It's not my thing. I'm teaching you the things that I have learned from personal, very personal, gut-wrenching experiences, and just so much internal turmoil and pain and suffering because I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't have somebody to help me through that process. So if you'd like to work one-on-one with me, I would love to chat with you and see if it's a good fit. My email is down below. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel if you want more, and share the video online if you know somebody else with chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue searching for answers, sort of alternative answers. And leave a comment below if you want. It really helps my channel to grow. So I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.